Welcome everyone. So we're going to have a panel discussion today, a little presentation, and then a panel discussion on hybrid cloud. And so what we'll do today, we'll, after introductions, we'll have a small presentation, a panel discussion, and then we'll kind of throw open the floor to questions from the audience. So the main session is we're going to learn how you can confidently manage and maintain control of your data across any cloud, accelerating innovation and IT responsiveness at the speed of the citizen. So I'll introduce the panelists. Starting on the far side, we have Lee Caswell. He's the Vice President of Products and Solutions Marketing at NetApp, and he leads a team that speeds the customer adoption of new products, partnerships, and integrations. Lee joined NetApp in 2014 and has extensive experience in executive leadership within the storage, flash, and virtualization markets. We also have McGuire. He's Director of Technology for Taborda Solutions, a public sector-focused provider of technology and implementation services. Brendan plays a leadership role in forming Taborda's solution offerings in data management, cloud, and mobile computing, and security and public sector industry vertical applications. And then David McLaughlin is the founder and CEO of Blue River Information Technology. And early on, David realized the potential of the cloud and developed solutions, expertise, and services for the market, expanding from the company's original focus on traditional IT infrastructures. And last but not least, we have Greg McGuire. He's the technical manager for the state of California's CalCloud, and he's graciously offered to sit in for Neeraj, Chauhan, who is the project director. So thanks, Greg, for filling in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lee, and we can learn about hybrid cloud.
Great, thanks, Steve. And welcome all. Yeah, thank you for coming today. We're in the early days of the cloud, and yet this year we'll have $248 billion we've spent on the cloud. And that sounds like a big number, right? But if you think about IT overall, IT is about 2.6 trillion. So it's about 10% right now of spend is going share of wallet into the cloud. And so you start thinking about that, and you're like, wow, well, one of the big issues is, well, how do I engage with the cloud? And so we're going to talk a little bit about the cloud, the hybrid cloud, and I think this is one of those areas where you just have to start talking about it in order to be more familiar with it. Hybrid cloud, the first time you say it, it doesn't just roll off your tongue, right? Hybrid, try it, hybrid cloud, yeah, it's not that. So, yeah, right, say it 3 times, right? But we're going to talk about what is a hybrid. We know what hybrid cars are, right? Hybrid cars like gas and electric, right, together. And the hybrid cloud is the idea that those things that we do today, the fact that you have your on-premises gear, like that's not going away. It just doesn't disappear. But the cloud means that we're going to have this hybrid world where things are engaged. We had a nice description by one of our VPs said, when President Kennedy back in the 60s said we're going to go and put a mission to put a man on the moon, like that's not exactly what they said was, or he said was, we have a mission to put a man on the moon, send a man to the moon, and back, right? And if you think about that, right, that was like incredible scope creep, really, right? It was a lot easier, right, to go and like send it one way, right? Now you have to like escape the moon's gravitational pull. You've got entry, re-entry, right? Parachutes, right? So the idea, right? I thought it was a nice visual. The idea that this is not a one-way leakage into the cloud, right? That's not what's happening. But it would be reckless not to take advantage of the fact that the cloud is providing a whole new way to tap into compute and storage, and they're different. So let me talk a little bit about that. How we think about this. It's changing business, government, right? So the world's largest taxi company today owns no vehicles. You think about that, right? Like Uber, right? This is what we're talking about, right? And you saw Carl Icahn just put $100 million into Lyft. I don't know if you saw that, right? I mean, these are massive entities right now where the service, right, is independent of the physical assets. And that's the cloud. It gives you that kind of a leverage. Or you take Facebook, right? So the world's most popular media owner, created no content. And so the idea is like, hey, you're leveraging other content. So how do you go and tap into that? The cloud gives you that. Today in California, So all the departments in the California Natural Resources Agency, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a bit. Steve, we're familiar with this area, right? So, consume shared resources from the private cloud. So we're going to talk about these private cloud, there's the public cloud, there's the hybrid cloud. Like, what is all this cloud and how are they different? It's important as we think about like what's going to happen here, because hybrid clouds provide the path. Customers are demanding access to the cloud, and the reason why, interesting enough, a lot of people think the cloud is cheap. It's like somehow it's going to be either free or cheap to go into the cloud. But it turns out the number one reason to go into the cloud is for flexibility. Like I can go in immediately, like now I can go and spin up some VMs. If you want to spin up some VMs inside of Amazon, take a credit card, try it out. Like you can do it in about 15 minutes, right? And you can spin them up and then you're done, right? And so if you want to try something out, if you've got, let's say, a test and dev workload, like now I can go and do that without having to buy all that gear. And for an application where I'm not sure whether I'm ever going to productize it, like that seems to make a lot of sense, right? It's like it was super fast. Right? So the speed of the cloud, right, is actually the number one benefit. And we're going to talk about some of the myths of why it's hard, right? And some of them are real, some of them are myths, but there are some issues around security, right? What happened? Where's my data, right? It's the Hillary Clinton phenomenon, right? Remember the email server? Like, yeah, so you want to know where your data is. There's security aspects. And so as we look at this, you want to control where your data lives, you want to control who has access to your data, and then you want to think about how you're changing this on your terms. And it's interesting, like all of this says data, right? Because it turns out, like let's say for example, you're a Gmail customer today, right? Or more to the point, you're probably like a Yahoo customer. We're recording this right now. Right, so anyways, so you're a Yahoo mail customer and you're like, I'm going to move to Gmail. And you've used Yahoo, you've used the compute resources of Yahoo, right, for years. But I'm going to suggest the only thing you care about when you switch didn't have anything to do with the compute. Actually didn't have anything to do with the network. The only thing you care about is the emails that you have, like that's data. It's the photographs that you saved, right, that's the data. It's all the documents that you have, right. The only thing that persists long term is the data. And also the next thing you think is, like now I have to move the data, right? I've got to move it. And it's not so easy to move data, as we all know, right? It's hard. I got to go and move it like on a thumb drive or on a CD or across a network, right? And so the idea that data, you want to treat that differently than the compute aspects of like accessing the cloud and where that is. And so we're going to talk a little bit about data. NetApp certainly is a data company, right? So the idea that you want to be thinking about where the data lives, how I move it, who's got access to it, how I control it, and think about that when you're engaging with the cloud. So here's some things that the cloud makes possible. We're talking about private cloud first. So let me start there, because for a lot of enterprise and even government customers, the idea that the enterprise data center that I have is now a private cloud, that can be a little bit of a stretch. So let's start there. All right, so what does it mean to go into the private cloud and have a private cloud? What that means is you're starting to match and look more cloud-like. And so the number one thing you have to do is offer the type of flexibility you can get from the cloud, which means I should be able, instead of going and buying another box, for example, in order to get some more capacity or some more storage, I should be able to just go into a console and be able to spin up some more compute or have access to some more storage. That's the idea of the private cloud. When you hear of things like as a service, right? You've heard of like, either a software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. All of those elements are designed to think that, hey, I should be able to go and just consume this, right? By going and saying I want it instead of I have to go and own it and put it in a spot, right? And so Uber's a good example of that probably, or just renting, right? The idea that I could rent a car versus buying a car, right? Now it might be cheaper if I only need a car for 3 days, right? But at some point you start thinking of the economics. It's really about the flexibility. Like I don't have to go when I fly to Phoenix. I don't have to go and buy a car, use it for 3 days, and then sell the car after that, right? So the idea that cloud gives you this flexibility And it's actually very economical for short periods of time. Make sense so far? All right, so, all right, that's the private cloud aspect. Now, we've got another metric here called the public cloud. And the public cloud is basically now I've got cloud providers, right? And some of them are here at this show, for example, right? So Verizon, for example. You've got others, AT&T, CenturyLink, Quest. What they're doing is providing those level of services, right? Either as a managed service provider, so you can have access to those resources. And then when you get into the hyperscale, what we call hyperscalers, this is companies like Google, Amazon. There's not a lot, by the way. In Asia, it's Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu. Right? These are big companies now that are providing more services. These guys are a little bit different in this sense that they're able to actually build their own products. Right? You think about Facebook building their own switches now, Google building their own switches. Right? This is a different level of investment that happens here. You're going to get a little different service, but you can start thinking now about applications as having a life cycle. And that's a little bit different, right? An application used to be, right, that I go and buy the equipment, go test that equipment out or test that application out. Now what happens is an application can be born in the cloud, right? So I can try it out here. And if it works, and I like it, it may be that I go and put it on a private cloud here, now that I control it, and I control the data that I'm providing. And then it may be that at the end, like now for backup and disaster recovery, like I don't want to own all the gear for that either. And so I'll go and get that data back up in the cloud. So you start thinking about an application as having a life cycle, and the data that's, that I'm storing could actually go and follow through the clouds. Make sense, right? So, and the hybrid cloud is the idea that, hey, I've got my own gear, right? I've got stuff that I own, I've got stuff that other people are managing for me, I've got stuff that I never own, right? Which is sitting up in Amazon, for example. But the value now says, what I need to start thinking about is, well, what am I tapping into? Is it compute or is it data? Let me talk a little bit about how these are different. Right, so I mentioned like compute is, we call it ephemeral, right? Which just means it's basically compute is there and then it's gone, right? It doesn't have a long lasting time. Where data has this gravity, we call it gravity, right? So it means that it's hard to move, right? It turns out like if you took a terabyte of data and you could try and send that over like a 1 gig link today, right? That takes about 160 minutes, which is how long? Like 3 hours. Right? It's a long time to go move data between places. Everybody's tried that, right? You try to go and like save things and move it, right? Or send a big video. Your kid sends you a video, you're at the end. Don't do that again. That's not. Right? So, the size of data relative to the network pipes that we have, right, is getting to be very, very large. And so you want to treat compute differently than data when you think about it. And it turns out now it's possible, right, to treat the clouds differently. You can go and you can use compute from the cloud, and you can use storage that's yours. And so you can start basically parsing apart, where we call this NetApp private storage in our world, right? So you can have your own data that's now accessing the compute in the cloud. So you've got some very interesting ways to think about this. In general, right, this flexibility that you have, we're just showing here that demand, if it's that dotted line there, can vary from what the supply is that you have. And what the cloud gives you is the opportunity to go and match that ideally. Right? It's that flexibility that gives you basically a very nice way to go and match your needs with what you're spending. I started in the flash market in, I think, 1986. We were building 1 megabit little parts, that were $1,000. Today, flash, right? Has everybody heard of flash and flash storage? Flash storage, which is the same storage that's in your iPhone, basically, right? Which is used in an enterprise, is 1,000 times faster than a disk drive. And so it's blazing fast, right? So for applications, if you're doing analytics, for example, any sort of big data analytics, you look at flash, right? And flash technology is a brand new way to go and get high performance. You think about 1,000 times faster, right? Now all of a sudden that's the sort of thing that can change your business. Things that used to take a week can now take a day, right? If you look at applications, so if you're using, let's say, Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle or other things, the use of flash means that you'll have a determinably different performance profile for the gear that you own versus what's in the cloud. It might be interesting actually just for a second to talk about how the storage architectures we have are different for your customer-owned gear than what you have in the cloud. So in the cloud, you have these very broad, we call them like federated architectures. So you're basically replicating data across. If you look at the Google file system, for example, I'm creating copies of data that I'm putting across actually different data centers. That's how I protect the data. Well, when you protect data in a typical enterprise environment, or today what we do, right, is you go and you protect it locally, and then you set a DR site, right? And you'll basically send it on to another physical site. The performance metric for what you can get on your own gear is about 10 times the performance that you'll ever be able to get out of the cloud today. So it's a very different performance metric. So one way to think about this is, as you think about getting analytics, so how many of you are doing some sort of analytics or interested? I see a couple of hands. Yeah. So analytics, right? You'll have the flexibility in the cloud. But if you're doing analytics on a real-time or mission-critical basis, start thinking about that from a performance standpoint. That may be where you want to shift that to the customer-owned equipment, right? Where you can have the dedicated performance that's materially different than what you can get in the cloud. And so it turns out that engaging with the cloud on storage is a very strategic decision, not just because of the security of the data, but because of performance. Okay, that is that one. The second issue, data sovereignty, right? We call it data sovereignty. What it means is who owns the data, right? And this is a big issue. It turns out I was in Berlin a couple of weeks ago, and it's a big, big deal. In Germany, for example, you can't have data in the cloud that's replicated across borders. It's not allowed. It's like legally restricted. So you got to start thinking about like, hey, where is my data going afterwards, right? And when it's in the cloud, it can be replicated across borders. It can be in different places. And so some of these things now, you just want to be thinking about what data is it and what do I put in the cloud. So you can start thinking about that. And then lastly, you mentioned that moving data is not fast, and in some cases it's not free either. Right? You can put data into the cloud, but taking it out can cost you money. All right. One of the things that's going to be interesting over time as you start thinking about these clouds. So again, here's the private cloud. We got our public cloud. We got hyperscalers here. Is how do you basically get to a world where all of this looks uniform, so I can share data across these clouds? And so there are companies, right, that are focusing on building what's called a data fabric. And this data fabric is the way to go and make sure that you can move to this world where it all kind of looks alike, right? So you don't care whether it's in Amazon or if it's in a Verizon or in CalCloud, right? And so in this, there's three main elements that help with that. One is you want to make sure it's fast and efficient to go back and forth between these clouds. We'll talk about a little bit of that in the panel here. We call it software defined. The idea that I shouldn't have to go and like re-plumb things when I want to change it. I should be able to just go on a console and change it. So a software defined access to that data. And then lastly, if you have a consistent data format, well, that's a precursor to make sure that you've got access to the data very simply across these different clouds. Right? So as we start thinking about it, it's not just one cloud. There's a couple of different implementations. And the idea is thinking about how all of this works, right? That's what a lot of emphasis is happening, and our panel will talk about that, about how we're helping with making this easy and seamless. So you get the benefit of which cloud you want to go and work through. We had a great case study with the National Resources Agency, right? So this is, you mentioned they were doing all the fire and
yeah, so we have, California Natural Resources Agency has about 30 combination of departments, councils, and boards, and they're the cloud provider for those agencies.
Right. Some terrific results here. You want to comment on these for a second? I mean,
yeah, it was great, great time. So so I'll talk a little bit of so as part of our modernization project, we went from physical environments into a virtualization environment, and now we're cloud providers for the agency. And so now the entire agency, we eliminated all the computer rooms that they have. Everything is virtual now. We're about 98% virtual across the entire agency. And you can see you'll show the numbers up there in a bit, but the
yeah, they're up.
Oh, they're up there. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So we had great results in the in operational the main thing, just the ease of provisioning is probably the biggest thing that our customers.
Simple, right? That software-defined access.
And we're moving towards more towards self-service. Right now, the self-service is pretty much out of our operations center, but we're moving towards models where. And one of the nice things about looking at public cloud is that you can offload that whole management and self-service out to cloud providers.
So if you think about virtualization, right? And so, how many of you have used virtualization or are familiar with virtualization? Yeah. Okay. So, virtualization came about, in the 70s in IBM, but VMware made it, very now accessible by all because it's now into the x86 platform, right? And so the idea basically meant that as soon as you broke the physical barrier of an application, or in this case, an operating system, running on a piece of physical hardware, that all of a sudden opened up a whole way to have a software-defined infrastructure, usually like within a server, right? The idea was now that, hey, in order to maintain a server, remember how hard it used to be to maintain a server? Like if you had to go and upgrade an application, right, you have to go and take another identically configured physical server, right? Set that up, get that ready, have the identical application, basically have everything in plan. It took weeks of planning. All virtualization changed all of that. Where now it became as simple as just migrating, live, right? That's vMotion. So I could live migrate an application to another physical server. And that meant that all of a sudden I had all this flexibility, right? And gave me a lot of, right, as a user, as a virtualization admin, a lot of flexibility. The cloud is this now extended, right, across outside of your boundaries. You just think about that, right? So it's basically virtualization, right, extended, so that I can now start taking and say, well, all right, I want to run this application over here, and I'm going to tap into this storage over here, right? And so that all of a sudden gives you the sort of benefits you look for, where you say, hey, you know what, like data growth is still growing at 40% per year. Like, can I have all that, or do I want to locate some of that over here? Or if I have like this application, maybe I don't want to buy all equipment for that myself. I'll go and rent that. DR is the ultimate kind of poster child for this, right? Where I'm not going to use it until I have a DR site. So these are the sort of things you look and say, hey, I really want to think about having access to the cloud. So that's what I had for today, and move to the panel.
Great. So one of the first things you were talking about the data fabric, which is interesting for us because as you start moving data across the various cloud providers, you start looking at the providers for basically what are the capabilities that each provider has, and maybe you're distributing your data as based on the abilities and what kind of data are you distributing and what are the abilities of the various providers. But maybe so the next first question for the panel would be how do you manage your data as you start distributing out across multiple providers and through that data fabric that they were just talking about?
I would love
I'll call on.
well, I know for CalCloud, since we're our own private cloud, and we do deal mainly with other state agencies, and their chief concerns around the security and compliance of their data. So we mainly look at trying to maintain those security controls in there to make sure their data is.
What are the security concerns that you see being from?
It's perception. It's around, the cloud is not secure. We've all heard about my cloud being hacked. And so I think it comes down to education to the customer on how secure the cloud can really be. The cloud is only going to be as secure as you make it. Because even if a physical data center, if you don't have those same security controls, they're just as wrong, if not more.
Lee, what do you talk to your customers about for security?
Well, we asked them a little bit about what do they do around their data anyway. If you have encrypted data, right? A lot of people learn if you have encrypted data and you put data into the cloud, right? It's still encrypted, right? So you start thinking about, I've got the security of the data itself. The security of the link itself, the network link, right? You want to be start to think about. So we encourage customers first off to do a little bit of a risk assessment, right? Tell us about your data. Tell us what you care about. What are you worried about? And then we can go and start saying, well, all the things we do kind of in your own, like on premises that we've done. Now we have to start just thinking about how we go and extend that out into, an area where, yeah, you may not control it, but it doesn't mean it's uncontrolled. That make sense?
And I think the nature of the concerns have changed a lot in like the last 24 months. Like, if you were to just rewind time 2-3 years ago, and you had a workload or a data set that included, data covered by HIPAA high tech, so PHI, there was virtually no public cloud provider that could support you. But in the last 2 years or so, there's now roughly about 15 of the major hyperscale and managed providers that have done FedRAMP certification, so they use a technical term. They've done their NIST 853 certification. So they're, in reality, and to your point, they're very secure and significant investments put into it. When I'm working with customers these days, like I said, 2 years ago, it used to just be, do you have PHI? Sorry, we can't help you now. It's investing time in changing the client's security plan to incorporate cloud. And that's kind of where I'm seeing a lot of the, I won't say effort, but just the new kind of considerations that you've got to work on for public cloud adoption.
If I put my, I'm a former data administrator, so if I put my data administration on, I can see that one of the points Greg brought up is the perception that cloud is less secure, and so so as a data steward, I'm going to want to make sure that I want to make sure the cloud, the data is protected, whether I'm on-prem or off-prem. So how would your role change as a data steward? Or does it change?
I think one thing that I've noticed, right, is that, let's take backup for a second. I mean, we talk a lot about backup, but actually, the only thing interesting about backup is restores, right? So like getting the data back and it turns out, right, that it's not so easy to go manage restores, right, and make sure that you can get data back. And one of the elements is you make this trade-off that says, well, all right, I'm going to put data into the cloud, so I have to think about the security of that. On the other hand, like, really, the reason I'm doing this is to go make sure that I can get access to the data. And so when you start thinking, one of the things about the cloud is the cloud doing something better than I could do it myself internally? So you start thinking about that, and you're like, well, that's their business. That's what they're doing all day long, every day. Then all of a sudden you start making trade-offs, right, that say, well, really my goal is to go get the data back. Let me address the security issues, but let's make sure that I never fall. I mean, has anybody here tried to get data back that didn't work? Yeah, right?
The main thing you want to protect it the same way, no matter where the data is at. So
good point, right?
You're going to have protection whether it's on-prem or off-prem. And I've seen areas where protection on-prem really wasn't as much as people thought that they
when you're looking at, yep.
So speaking of, so I like how you described the private cloud is kind of an on-prem solution. Public cloud is really solutions that aren't on-prem, that are provided by mainly commercial providers. What are the main things that I can get in a public cloud that you might not necessarily be able to do or wouldn't be feasible to do on-prem?
Well, for us, it was a lot of the scalability and the cost savings. At least that's what we were looking for. So my company went out 4 or 5 years ago and started to deploy stuff within Amazon Web Services. And our core business was coming in and building data centers for like folks like you. So data centers, we focus on data. We started to launch stuff in AWS just to see how it worked, how things work like that. And some of the things that we found were, it was very, very scalable, but there were gaps in the technology that we weren't seeing. So we're with NetApp. I've sold a lot of NetApp, and we weren't seeing that enterprise-grade storage within an Amazon or Azure really anywhere. So I was used to taking snapshot backups of my database and restoring them really fast. And I've been doing that for 10 years. Went to AWS, I'm like, well, how am I going to do this now? Because they don't do that. Moving data to the cloud, that was an issue for us too. just getting, how do you get a petabyte from your on-premise? I mean, Amazon at times like, we'll back it up to tapes and ship us the tapes. Another thing I asked in a long time, I'm like, you kidding me? I'm not going to buy a tape library for that. So these gaps and things that you see, I mean, they make a big difference. So there were a lot of unknowns that we started to recognize in these hyperscale cloud providers. We wanted the cost savings and the efficiency on demand, but it was like, well, how do you put it all together so it really makes sense? The first thing I did, I had an engineer guy from DIA who total, write all the books and everything. This guy, I said, take the Microsoft thing and deploy SharePoint. So, I mean, full-blown SharePoint, front end, web servers, database servers, firewall. So in the end, it ended up being about 18 servers. He comes back, I get a bill a month later. It's $25,000. I go, what did you do? This is Amazon. I had my credit card on that. People identify the books. They said, I did extra large servers. I'm like, you don't do that. I'm like, it just cost me 25 grand to do extra small. You don't have 50,000 people hitting it. So what we learned was, hey, we can do extra small and scale it really, really fast if we had to. So we ended up with a small, medium, and large. 5,000 users, 15,000, 25. So the automation was really cool, but the learning how to do it, it cost me a lot of money. My money. So I just tell my kid, you can't go to college. But the data stuff really started to take the forefront of everything. Because, when we were going, it was like an epiphany. He said, most of these cloud providers look at it from the application layer and they say, oh, we're going to do this application and this. You got to start where the data is. We did data consolidation, right? We've all been through this. Oh, where's my data? It's on this here. You bring it all into the center, right? It's the same thing for cloud. It's the same thing. It's just a data center somewhere else. We did the NetApp. We connected NetApp to Amazon because of that database thing. We had sold a customer in Michigan, SharePoint. Right? So we have SLAs in our contract that say we're going to restore that thing in an hour. Right? I don't get that in just an AWS. So we had this thing, we got it to work, we connected NetApp private storage to AWS, and I was like, cool, now I can do my Snap Manager stuff. Not even really realizing what we were building. But over time, we're like, hey, not only can I do that, but I can replicate data now and get it close to the cloud. I can go in and pull disk drives if I want to. I do a lot of business in the federal government. They have something called data spillage. Classified system, email goes into an unclass, they got to come in and pull disk drive. You can't do that in Microsoft Azure. You can't even find the data center in Amazon. They won't tell you. That was another thing. But long term, what I really started to see was, okay, I'm going to sell all this cloud stuff. What am I going to end up with? If I put my data into Amazon or Azure or these other things, I'm stuck for 10 years maybe. What's going to happen? The stickiness that everybody talks about, once you're in there, they got you. And good luck moving out later. It's going to cost you a pretty penny. So I was like, wow, if we keep it on NetApp and I put it in my colo and I get all the scalability and flexibility of the cloud, that's awesome. I keep my data. And guess what? NetApp was like, hey, we're going to build this thing where you can shift the workload from AWS to Azure so I can move my applications around. I'm like, that's really cool because I can go back to Amazon at some point and say, your prices are kind of going up a little. Can you drop them? It gives us leverage, right? So a lot like you all, I pay for this stuff personally in that way. It's different. But the flexibility that we got, kind of.
That's right.
Once I get going.
Well, so a lot of ways that people are first getting into the cloud decides, they'll do small projects just to dip their toe in, but then it seems like disaster recovery is the next big wave. Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the disaster recovery things that you guys use to protect your cloud and maybe some of the services that you offer to customers?
So CalCloud is primarily an infrastructure as a service model, self-service model. Everything's done through a portal, so it's up to the customer to choose if they want DR. We have currently 2 levels of DR. Our DR, our primary tier 1 DR is really a replication to a remote site. And we have an RTO time of 1 hour for that tier 1 DR. So in a DR event, that tier 1 customer should be, their or their servers should be up and running within there. And then we have a tier 2 service, which is more the traditional restore method, so subscribe. And that one has, I believe it's a 96 or 72 hour RPO, and when they are.
How do you guys address security, the security perception that we were talking about?
Well, for us, our baseline for CalCloud, we set the baseline that we are NIST and FedRAMP compliant. And we are implementing the controls for PCI for those customers that do have regulatory data that needs to come in. And I agree that yes, the customer does have to identify their data and let us, let you know what that data is.
On the disaster recovery side for us, what we realized was many years ago we were working with the State Department, and I was building out their main data center and then a backup data center in Denver. And we priced out the whole thing for the production side, and then let's say that was $10 million worth of stuff. And then we did the disaster recovery side, and it was 10 million plus. So it ended up being more like 30 million. Because I needed that one-to-one scenario, like I need like and kind on each side, plus, backups that go out, 3 months, 6 months, the longer the higher the cost goes up. When we started to do the NetApp stuff with AWS, what I could do is replicate the data, so I still needed a one-to-one on the storage side, but in the application side, I could replicate the application, update it, and spin it down. So think about that. I don't need a bank of systems sitting there, compute, waiting to fail over. You know how much money that saves? It takes your disaster recovery and goes, now you're just paying for storage. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So we go into places and I'm like, I can fail you over tomorrow. I can start migrating your stuff and you don't have to pay me like through the nose for this. And then the cool thing with that was once the application's over there, it's sitting there, guess what? It actually just migrated. So it's really neat.
Well, so we're coming to the end of our regular session, but I'd probably throw it open to the folks if they want to have any questions for us. We've got lots of expertise up here with cloud and storage and data fabrics.
So do you have latency problems between, say, AWS and your NetApp in-house?
No, because we selected a facility that sits right next to AWS. So we're in Ashburn, Virginia, and we sit in Equinix. And again, it was kind of by chance how we found them, but those guys, that colo provider in Ashburn gets 70% of the internet traffic through it.
Okay.
So they sit right on top of the pipe. So all the providers build around them to get that access.
Okay.
My cage, literally, well, also when Amazon was in that data center and then moved out, and they left all their networking stuff. My cage, I could literally like throw the cable over and plug into their core switching. So my latency there is like sub-millisecond. So I can run really fast. Now when you get out here and you look at San Jose, Silicon Valley, Seattle to US West or GovCloud, it's a little farther, but there's ways to address some of that stuff too. But yeah, latency is like key for that. But that's why we selected primarily Equinix. When you look around the world, you see an Equinix facility, it's Amazon's right next to it. I don't know why that happens. I guess it's just like.
Do the other customers have issues with that?
We do, yeah. So we can actually go and look, into what our storage volumes or our access to. And so what we started looking was Equinix customers, for example, where we had less than 4 millisecond latency between the storage. Because we call it, we have a name for that. We call it NetApp private storage. Because what you got is your own storage, right? So you own the storage, you get data sovereignty issues, like now it's all yours, right? But then you're tapping into like Amazon from a compute instance. And so we have thousands of customers doing that. We didn't even know about it for the same sort of thing. It was like customers figured it out. So what happened was customers say, we originally thought it was for security purposes, like I want to own the data, but that's not what happened, right? It turns out you can buy IOPS out of the
cloud, but you can't guarantee when they're delivered, right? So, and it's expensive, right? If you go from Glacier at, you know, a penny a gigabyte per month up to, there's now like a file system, EFS, right on, that's 30 cents a gigabyte a month, right? I mean, cost goes like this, right, if you want performance. So what we found was customers were saying, hey, you know what, I've got like big data sets that I want to own, but really what I want to do is I want to tap into the compute on a flexibility basis and just spin those up, access the data, process new data, and then be done. And so the compute goes, so you're bursting into the cloud for compute. Like, all right, so yeah, we have thousands of customers doing that, and they figured it out because they were like, hey, I've already got the data here. To move it would be costly and time consuming. So why don't I just go and tap into the compute that's available there? Yeah, so it's turning out to be a hybrid. It's a hybrid of a hybrid almost, right? So I own the storage resources, right? Because that's the heavy gravity part, right? And then I'm going to go tap and burst into the cloud.
Yeah, those people, the ones, the customers that did it, were primarily in Equinix already. So they just saw some marketing material came out, and they said, oh, cool, direct connect. Let's try that. And it was just like us. So they found value in that, and they started to deploy stuff. But latency, it's where you pick stuff. If you were going to put a system here and connect it to the East Coast, not
Yeah, we're using 4 milliseconds as the threshold.
Time for one more quickie. Tim?
So as you travel through the government sector, like I know you do a lot of business with the feds and other states. So just on typical, the government sector's type of data, what do you think the split is going to end up between on-prem private clouds versus then using, hosted clouds like someone else? What percentage split do you kind of project as you're modeling for your margins?
it would be a guess.
Yeah.
But looking at their workloads and the data, they can move a lot.
Yeah.
But the providers out there, will be able to do that private storage in those facilities. So what you end up is this hybrid cloud that you don't own.
60-40, 37?
Could be 70%. We were working with one federal agency, and they're taking 54 data centers down to the whole agency, not just 3. And they said everything else goes to cloud. And what's going to come back to is that just those really sensitive workloads are going to stay in house. Or those old applications, they'll start rewriting stuff, for things. But
it may vary by vertical too. Like ERP type data may be more conducive, whereas human services data has a little bit more security concerns around it. May say a lower percentage.
Okay, cool. I want to thank everybody. We'll be sticking around outside here if there's other questions, but I really want to thank the panel. It was a great discussion. Thanks for helping.